Hi, I'm John Green. This is Crash Course Literature, and this is A Raisin in the Sun. Well, to continue, this play doesn't even have 5 acts. Even with this huge book, it's actually a literature textbook anyways. Well, it's so magnificently complex and great, we're going to have to focus on one single question for today. How did Lorraine Hansberry show the American dream?
Mr. Green, I think!
Aw, it's so cute when you think you know the answer of me from the past. Even though you're going to be wrong, I know it. But you'll one day have to host a show. Explain the ambiguous glory of literature. So, a while back we discussed The Great Gatsby and how great he was. Now obviously, A Raisin in the Sun is not a novel like that, but a play. But it's just as important as Great Gatsby in portraying the decade it was written about. Moving on, as many high schoolers pointed out, the play might not be the most exciting thing to read, as it's just a story about an African-American family living their life. Anyways, but Hansberry heightened the excitement of reading through the actuality of society in the 1950s shown through the characters. You can basically see what life was back then by reading the play, like the all-white neighborhoods or the leisure activities. Well, back to the American dream. So how exactly did Hansberry portray the 1950s?
Let's check it out.
A Raisin in the Sun portrays the same racism that occurred in America in the 1950s. America in the 1950s were very racist towards the colored people. For one example, the colored people had bad jobs. And the reason for that is because the opportunities. They didn't get much opportunities compared to the white people. That's in the 1950s America. But in The Raisin in the Sun, they portrayed this by the man of the house for the Youngers family, Walter Lee. He was a chauffeur, and he didn't make much money to fund for his family.
And he considered his job to not be a job, but more like nothing. He believed it was not even worth to consider it as his career because he was basically like a slave to his employer, opening doors, closing doors, and driving him wherever he wanted. Walter Lee also knew that the reason that he could only find jobs like being a chauffeur was because of his race. He had a growing sense of hatred inside of him towards the black community because due to the prejudices and segregation towards the African Americans, he was not able to make as much money as he wanted to. In this quote, Walter shows his thoughts about how his race is the reason he is behind in life compared to the whites in society. Why? You want to know why? Because we all tied up in a race of people that don't know how to do nothing but moan, pray, and have babies.
This quote shows that he's very hatred towards the black community, and because he doesn't make much money because of them. And he's really upset of the black community, and he feels like if they would change, he would make as much money as the white people, like said in this quote.
Mama, sometimes when I'm downtown and I pass them cool, quiet-looking restaurants where them white boys are sitting back and talking about things, sitting there turning deals worth millions of dollars. Sometimes I see guys don't look much older than me.
And if he believes if he was white, he would be more successful and have enough money to fund his family. In A Raisin in the Sun, segregation was harsh. And they tried to copy the segregation that occurred in America in the 1950s. In the 1950s in America, segregation was terrible, but not as bad as how they put it in The Raisin in the Sun. And they showed this by everything public and available for anybody was split. They made 2 versions, split for the white and the colored. The people that had the colored side was always bad quality, but technically it wasn't racist because they still got the same product in the end. But in The Raisin in the Sun, when the Youngers family were trying to move into the white neighborhood, Linder tried to buy off the house off them because there was complaints coming from them that the neighborhood that black people were coming to their neighborhood and they were getting really angry, so they're trying to buy it off them.
Well, I don't understand why you people are reacting this way. What do you think you are going to gain by moving into a neighborhood where you just aren't wanted and where some elements, well, people can get awful worked up when they feel their whole way of life and everything they've ever worked for is threatened?
This quote shows the wickedness of the people and that they were willing to buy it off them just because they're black. They don't even know who the people are. They're just assuming right away that because they're black, they're bad people.
Also, these white people in society kept away from these African Americans because they considered themselves as superior. So, they created their own communities and did not want the African Americans to come into their white-only communities. To go even further, they did not want to share even the slightest things like a waiting room or a water fountain. Well, this just proves that for the younger family, the American dream was almost impossible. If the white people in society did not let them do anything, how are they supposed to reach out to their dreams? Well, let's move on to discuss how class status also inhibited reaching the American dream for the younger family.
Thanks, me.
No problem.
Now, let's continue on discussing class status in the 1950s. During this time, there was a large gap between the urban working class and the wealthy class. There was no middle class. That's why, in Raisin in the Sun, their insurance check was so important to the younger family. Even though during this time period the poverty rate shrunk, people left in the depths of cities remained unacknowledged by the government and riddled with struggles. You see, America was entering an age of conformity, or correspondence, where most citizens abide by traditional societal values. Along with this conformity came a large wave of materialism and heightened the desire for wealth. In the first act of Raisin in the Sun, Walter confides to Mama,
Do you know what this money means to me? Do you know what this money can do for us?
even here, Walter, like most of the other characters in the story, are desperate for money. In this conformist age, the younger struggle in the competition for wealth among society, which we know has a distinct distinction. Obviously, the youngers are the farthest from anyone to be Bill Gates. They are part of the urban working class. These people consist of those who live in tenements and ghetto slums of the impoverished areas and cities. In Raisin in the Sun, this means the Chicago South Side slums. Class distinctions were just that, distinct. The book specifically mentions that the younger family must share a bathroom with the entire floor of the apartment complex. On the other hand, a rich family, such as the Murchisons, do not have to face that struggle.
The Murchisons are honest-to-God, real-life, rich, colored people, and the only people in the world who are more snobbish than rich white people are rich colored people. I thought everybody knew that. I've met Mrs. Murchison. She's a scene.
Another example of class distinction in this play is when Walter, once again, complains that he has to drive his rich employer while he cannot afford a car himself. These classic examples reflect on the reality of struggles for the poor in the 1950s. Under Eisenhower, people like the Youngers were left out of the growing prosperity in the country. A whopping 25% of citizens were in poverty. This portrays the main theme of this group, which was invisibility. And on that note, it's time for our open letter of the day. Let's take a look and see who incited us today. Take it away, me from the past.
The poor are politically invisible. It is one of the cruelest ironies of social life in advanced countries that the disposed at the bottom of society are unable to speak for themselves. The people of the other America do not, by far and large, belong to unions, to fraternal organizations, or political parties. They are without lobbies of their own. They are atomized. They have no face. They have no voice. That poor are invisible is one of the most important things about them. They are not simply neglected and forgotten as in the old rhetoric of reform. What is much worse, they are...
Okay, great. Let's think. He or she is deeply criticizing American society, so they must be a reformer. They make the connection of the invisibility of the poor, like the Youngers, but the excerpt sounds so incomplete, so it must be from something bigger. I'm going to say Michael Harrington's The Other America. Yes! Great. Thank you, Mr. Cameron. Yes, Harrington's study in The Other America exposed most of the fundamental neglects of the poor in cities, including political disrecognition and isolationism. This just comes to show that for people like the Youngers, the American dream was virtually impossible to achieve. Now, I'll leave it to the another me to discuss how gender relates to society and class of the 1950s. Take it away.
The 1950s were a glorious time period for one group of individuals, white men. In the 1950s, the epitome of the American dream, as it pertained to women, was one of a life of leisure. They were supposed to be content with taking care of their children and being compatible mates to their husbands. Their roles were enforced by the invention of many new household products, like the Hoover vacuum, the electric mixer, and disposable diapers, which were supposed to bring more joy to housekeeping. In fact,
many men in this era believe that women should be content with pleasing them.
On page 818, Walter says, "That is just what is wrong with the colored woman in this world. Don't understand about building their men up and making them feel like they somebody, like they can do something."
This quote reveals sexist undertones that are prevalent in many places in the book. While this quote shows how Walter feels women should only exist to be enamored and in awe of their men, it also gives an insight into how emasculated Walter feels. Walter does not feel like a man because he believes he is not providing sufficiently for his family. He blames his failures on his wife's lack of support. However, Walter fails to recognize his lack of support for Ruth's dreams, whatever they may be. In fact, throughout the whole play, Ruth is one of the only characters that is not selfishly struggling to achieve her own dream. Everything she aims to do is for the good of the family. Ruth even contemplates having an abortion in order to save her family from the added economic pressure.
On page 834, Lena says, "When the world gets ugly enough, a woman will do anything for her family, the part that's already living."
It was also hard for women who did not quietly succumb to domestic life to be taken seriously.
On page 843, George says to Benitha, "I want you to cut it out, see? The moody stuff. I don't like it. You're a nice-looking girl all over. That's all you need, honey. Forget the atmosphere. As for myself, I want a nice, simple, sophisticated girl, not a poet, okay?"
Benitha, like many intelligent and ambitious women of this period, were held back due to systematic misogyny. This phenomenon was most famously written about by the incendiary Sylvia Plath in her one and only novel, The Bell Jar. This novel chronicles a bright young woman as she struggles against the suppression of society and deals with navigating societal expectations, which include dropping her dreams to become a wife and mother. Benitha deals with the same issues, but in the end, she decides to follow her heart, move to Ghana, and become a wife. However, she also tries to complement her domestic life with her dream by still aspiring to be a doctor. This shows the complexity of the female characters in the 1950s.
So, in the end, how exactly did Lauren Hansberry show the American dream? I'm interested in your comments, but here's my takeaway. Hansberry showed the impossibility of the American dream through the portrayal of society in the 50s, specifically involving race, class, and gender. Society back then was really like this if you take a look at history, with the heavy splits between all ranks, including race, class, gender, and on and on. Can you imagine? Well, the American dream is represented as impossible because of these differences. It is clearly shown through the magnificently wonderful play, A Raisin in the Sun. I guess a dream is just a dream, although most characters reach their dream in the play, like Mama. Well, that's all for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week. Crash Course is produced and directed by Jillian Solander, Jerry Hong, Maria Rusova, and Hyder Dura. The show is written by Jillian Solander, Jerry Hong, Maria Rusova, and Hyder Dura, and the editor is me. You can comment below if you would like to ask any questions which will be answered by our team. Thanks for watching Crash Course, and as I always say, don't forget to stay awesome.